Hey guys, I know this may be a surprise to you having a video today on Thursday, January 7th, but I decided I wanted to make one quick short video. You guys might be kicking and screaming and complaining, but that's okay. It'll be 15 minutes tops, and you can handle it. It's just a video, no Zoom or anything, it's just a video. All right, so I wanted to make sure we could get ahead a little bit if we can. I might actually give a quiz soon as well. Maybe tomorrow on Friday I'll post a quiz or something. But anyway, I wanted to pick up where we left off. As you can see here, we were discussing the problems in the West and problems with Europe. The problems in Europe stemmed from, as we had discussed, the French Revolution. People in France revolted against the king of France and and killed the king and set up a new government. So all these European nations were each fighting against France because of they felt like they had even the ones that had previously been friends with France had felt like they were they had killed somebody that they were friends with. But anyway, as I had mentioned, America had signed the Proclamation of Neutrality. They didn't want to side with Britain. They didn't want to side with France. They were just going to stay neutral. And so we see here a word, impressment, which is number 14 on your notes. And so the practice of impressment begins by the British. The British had actually done this before the American Revolution as well. And what it is the idea of stopping American ships and forcing the American crew into the British Navy. What they would do is that they would find cargo ships or whatever, or trading vessels, and they would take some or all of the crew and make them join the British Navy. The reason why they were doing this is because the British Navy was finding less and less people were volunteering for their wars because their wars were going on and on and on and on. And less people were joining, and a lot of men were deserting. So sometimes they would stop a ship and they would find a deserter on the ship, and they would force the guy back to come in to the British Navy. Well, they started doing this, but then they started taking Americans too and claiming, oh, this guy, I think he's a British guy. Yeah, I think he's British too. And so this idea of impressment, they were just basically kidnapping American citizens and forcing them to be in the British Navy against their will. And they were saying, I'm American, I'm American. And they're like, oh, no, we don't believe you. And sometimes even if they knew they were American, they just would claim that they didn't believe them. So this made, obviously, Americans pretty angry. And so to deal with this, Washington sends John Jay. John Jay was Chief Justice of the Supreme Court at the time. Kind of a strange person to send over to negotiate Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, but John Jay himself had actually been to Europe before, and sorry, I'm yawning here. He'd been to Europe before, so he thought he would be a good person to go. So John Jay goes over to try to deal with this British problem of impressment, and so. And in addition to those problems, the British had also, as I mentioned yesterday, the British had also, as we remember, they're up in Canada at this point in time, and they've been coming down to the Ohio River Valley and kind of stationing themselves down there. And they were supplying the Native Americans with weapons at different points, and there were even places that they refused to leave. And so kind of dealing with the impressment of soldiers and dealing with having the British on their land. And, to a lesser extent, some of the southern landowners were also upset because, if you remember, during the Revolutionary War, the British were telling slaves that if they joined the British side of the Revolution, if they escaped and joined the British side of the Revolution and fought for the British, that the British would grant them freedom. And so a lot of the southern plantation owners were upset about that and said, you cost me some slaves, so I expect compensation. I want you to pay me for the fact that so many of them left. Now, when John Jay got to England, he didn't even care about that. He's like, who cares about those southern slave owners? They don't need to have their slaves back. It doesn't matter. And so he was really just dealing with getting the British off the soil and dealing with impressment. And so, and he also wanted to allow the American ships to trade with British in the Caribbean and give trade. Well, this treaty, he ends up signing a treaty called Jay's Treaty, which is number 15. Jay's Treaty, essentially, unfortunately, did not deal with the biggest problem. Did not deal with the problem of impressment. He tried to work on impressment, but the British soldiers were like, the British government officials were like, no, we need to be finding our soldiers on those boats, and so we are going to continue with that. And so the only thing they would agree to is to leave their soil, and the Americans agreed to continue paying back the debts that they owed Britain, and essentially the butting of heads that had been happening between Britain and the United States was kind of eased for a little while, and the treaty also kind of gave a favored trading status to Britain. So essentially, this treaty was looked at. It failed for its main purpose, was dealing with impressment, but it got the British off of American soil and gave favorable trading status to Britain. Like, they would go to, if they wanted to trade with a country, they would go and check with Britain first. And so this treaty was not received very well in the Senate. A lot of people were like, wait, Britain, the country we just fought a war to leave, we are now siding with them in this conflict? It's bad enough that, to some people, it was bad enough that they didn't side with France, who was supposed to be their friend. And now we're like siding with trading policies with Britain instead, and they weren't even going to stop kidnapping our sailors. So this Jay Treaty was looked at by a significant portion of the population as a huge failure, and the portion of the population that looked at it as a failure were the people that, like the Jeffersonian Democratic Republicans that are going to be forming, that I was telling you about before. They were the ones that did not like it. Well, remember, we had also issues with Spain. So our issues with Britain we just dealt with. We also had issues with Spain. Spain controlled the city of New Orleans. Remember, we talked about this before? The city of New Orleans we were dealing with, I think it was last chapter. It's been so long since before Christmas break. The city of New Orleans, they were preventing us from using New Orleans to we had to bring supplies down the Mississippi River, and so the New Orleans. I'm sorry, I just got a message up on my screen. Distracted me for a second. We were sending supplies down the Mississippi River, and New Orleans was the place that, the supplies were able to exit the Mississippi River and exit out to the East Coast. Excuse me. And so we needed to deal with that as well. And so we sent a guy named Thomas Pinckney to Spain to deal with that. Now, he was a bit more successful with his treaty. We had Pinckney's treaty here. Part of the reason why he was more successful was Spain saw even though Jay's treaty was kind of a failure, it allowed us to get Pinckney's treaty signed, which Pinckney's treaty allowed us now to use New Orleans, because Spain saw that we had this favorable dealing with Britain, and they were like, oh no, they're going to start dealing with Britain a lot more. It's going to hurt our relationship with the Americans and stuff like that. So we got to have some sort of deal with the Americans ourselves. So they were willing to sign this deal to allow us to use New Orleans, although, spoiler, it's only going to last a couple of years. So the three that we've done so far: impressment was the capturing of ships and making the crew serve in the Navy, which Britain was doing. Jay's treaty was John Jay was sent to Britain to sign a deal ending impressment. He did not end impressment, but he only got Britain to leave American soil, and gave favorable trading status to Britain. And Pinckney's treaty was a treaty with the Spanish that allowed us to be able to use New Orleans. Now, So at this point in time, Washington was elected in 1780, 88, 89, and then his first term ended in 1792. Then he was re-elected in 1792 again, and his second term ends in 1796. He didn't even want to serve a second time, but he was begged and begged and begged to serve a second term, and he finally relented. They're actually going to ask him. They're asking him to serve a third term as well, and that's the time he's like, "No, I'm not serving a third term. Forget it. I'm all done." And so he announced he would not be seeking a third term. He's in his 60s at this point in time, so he gives a farewell address, and he tells in his farewell address, he tells the people he's saying goodbye to, he wants them to stay away from 4 specific things. He wants them to stay away from sectionalism, which means like you're favoring your region over other regions. That'll come into play in a couple of chapters. Sectionalism he wants them to stay away from. He wants them to stay away from permanent alliances, like aligning yourself with a different country permanently, and we'll see what happens with that when come World War I. We probably won't even get there into that this year, but probably next year. He says stay away from European wars. Again, World War I, there's plenty of things that happened because of the European wars. And then the fourth thing he tells them that he wants them to stay away from is forming political parties. He said the forming of political parties just causes division, causes disunity, it splits people apart. But little did he know, political parties had already formed. I've been kind of talking about them. There were the Federalists, who were followers of like Alexander Hamilton and John Adams, and there were the Democratic Republicans, who were the followers of Thomas Jefferson and James Madison. And these political parties had already been forming, but they weren't official yet. Now that he's out, now they're official. They're going to be official starting in the next section. So I'm going to give you a little bit of homework tonight. Be on the lookout for a quiz on Friday as well. All right, so I will talk to you guys later. Bye.